off with a little 3, 2, 1. And we're live. Welcome to the first episode of the KAJ Convos podcast. The intent of this podcast is to first and foremost take a peek into our minds and the thought process of just really two friends starting a company. We'll want to share the ups, the downs, our mindset going into this, why we're doing this, our vision, everything. We want this podcast to give our listeners a realistic view of what it's like to be an entrepreneur and to take the leap, some would say, into being an entrepreneur. We also want to tell the stories of other people that inspire us. So along with our founders convos, we'll interview a bunch of local entrepreneurs to get their perspectives, try to understand their passions and understand why they do what they do. So with all that out of the way, to start off with this first pilot episode podcast, let's just talk a little bit about who we are.
Right.
So we haven't introduced ourselves yet, but I'll start by introducing you.
Oh, shit.
But rather than just actually introducing you, we can just talk about this. So
Right.
Why don't you just give your name and just give a little blurb about who you are as a person?
Right. So, I am Kohl Meister, one of two founders of KAJ Convos. And who I am as a person is a hard question, but it's a wide open one.
Yeah.
Someone who is ready to learn, ready to take the next step, always looking to move forward, so to speak.
Yeah.
We'll get into details around hobbies and passions, careers, and those kinds of things. But in terms of where I am right now, late 20s, early 30s, moving into this interesting phase of life where you're kind of getting into the meat and potatoes. You've potentially had some schooling, you've had some thoughts develop about what you think life should be, what you want to do in this life. And now is a call to action. Now is a time where taking some initial learnings, starting to apply them, starting to grow in business capacities and growing in personal capacities as well. So,
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we share. It's funny, we share a lot of the same backgrounds, and we'll talk. We probably talk a bit about that like now. Do you remember the story before we get into the business side of like what we're actually doing and
Right.
a little bit about our work background? Do you remember the story of how we met?
Yeah. I know the story of how we first connected.
Yeah.
If I know the first moment we said hi, I don't know about that.
Yeah. But
I remember
the first
yeah.
memory.
Well, are we going to intro you or are we going to talk about this first?
No, we'll talk about this first. It'll
okay,
spiral
so
into
from my perspective, my first impression was because we were working for a small software company here in Calgary. Every day we'd have our stand-up. We're working in Kensington, and we'd have a stand-up, and you could fit our whole company in one room.
Yeah.
And I look across the way, and there's this guy. He was
great looking.
He was balder, happier. He was more jacked.
It's true.
I looked across the way, and I was like, damn, who is this guy? And also, how old is he? I honestly don't know.
Asian genes.
I thought you were older, to be honest.
Yeah.
I thought you were a couple years older. And because you're decked out, you're going on client site, so you're
Right.
dressed in some business cash. And I was like, who's that guy?
Right.
Because also I'd met some of the team already, and you'd been off site, so I hadn't met you.
I didn't know that.
And so then I'd seen you in one of these things, and I was like, part of the team, but I don't know who this guy is. I don't know if you're part of the company or contractor or anything like that. So I remember seeing you as this guy's dressed clean, but shrouded in mystery. And then, the way we connected was one fateful sushi lunch That's the one that I remember. That's the one we talk about.
But before we talk about that story, just quickly, and how we just ended up having a bunch of not only common interests, but common, I guess, just people in our lives, given that we're both born and raised in Calgary. Calgary's a small city, so small-ish city. So it's like, I always say that you're one person away from knowing everyone. But the first time I ever heard about you, I think, and you obviously know this story, was when our friend Travis, the HR guy at said small company, comes up to me after he interviews you and he just comes up to me and he's like, Adrian, you have to like stop what you're doing. I just interviewed the best looking guy I've ever seen in my entire life. He's an Abercrombie model. He is as good as it gets. 10 out of 10 looks.
Look at me now,
and
Mom.
then I saw you and I questioned everything that Travis told me.
Yeah, that's when I knew I couldn't trust Travis.
But yeah, so we ended up going for sushi that one day, as we always did with that team, which I do also want to talk about. It just about like how like the team dynamics was back in that old company.
Right. But so we should do that. We should talk about the dynamics and get into some of our initial experiences in a professional capacity. But let's bring it back for a second and do a quick little intro of Adrian.
Sure. So you heard the story. My name's Adrian Bautista, born and raised here in Calgary. Man, a lot of it is the exact same things as like what you said. It was just, we're late 20s going on to turning 30 in 4-ish months now. Been working in the corporate world here in Calgary, growing the career, growing the life, and just decided that it's time to venture off and start our own company. And I think part of the stories that'll come out of today kind of talks about how really you and I ended up getting into this room together and starting this company, because it's a lot of, some would call it fate, a lot of events that led up to the two of us building a friendship, building trust, building a work relationship that made it so that we would both decide to leave that company and just be here today, which is interesting because we were talking about it actually just sitting here in the HQ boardroom. We were talking just the other day about how crazy it is that we're just here. Just like it makes like like fucking far. 6 months ago we were like, we had an idea. I think over the past 6 years that we've known each other, we've had a bunch of ideas.
Yeah, if you take it back further, for sure.
But like, this is the one that we were just like, let's just try,
Well, and it's funny that mindset, remember, so, part of our story as well, and our journey goes through working together, in a professional corporate setting, working together, externally playing sports, but then we also live together, and we're spinning a bunch of ideas that way. But while we're living together, I remember we had the whiteboard, and we were trying to start stuff and get things going. And at one point I just scribbled in like caps locks, like try, just to try. All we need to do is try, and you can make stuff happen. And I think we were trying to try at first, and now we're trying to do.
Right. That's interesting. Because one of the things that you and I always say too, especially because we've had to work together like on projects and all that stuff a lot, was like it seems, and it's kind of a bit cocky to say, but it's like, it feels as if like if you and I we have the capabilities to do whatever we want to do, right? And it's like with your skill set, with my skill set, plus like our working relationship and just like our friendship in general, it's like it's easy to see how we could be successful in like any venture that we actually put our minds to and try. And rather than try, like you're saying, we actually have to go out and do, right? And that's exactly where we're at right now. No, that's interesting because, and that leads to, I guess, like, let's talk a little bit about how, like, what we did for work. What did you do for work for the past 6 years prior to us taking on this entrepreneurial venture?
Like just from like career journey, just in general, like.
And just give a bit of color of our We'll give a bit of color on our backgrounds, because like people here are gonna like listen and they'll be like, well, these two guys, like, are they starting a company? It's a bit vague right now, but let's give a bit of history about who we are and then how we came up with this idea is how we'll run this. Like we'll tell the stories about that. Right,
sure. And so I guess to build on a little bit of some bio here. I went to born born in Edmonton, raised in Calgary, stayed in Calgary, did U of C, went to geophysics, and hammered that out and graduated 2012, kind of right before oil and gas started to take a downturn in Calgary here.
Yeah.
And so during my search for a geophysics profession, I kind of lucked out. Depending on how you look at it, is I lucked out by not finding a job. It was pretty bleak trying to find a job in geophysics. So I landed at a job doing business planning for oil and gas companies via software, a company called 3ESI, and I'd got my foot in the door from my older brother Dane. So kind of first real job outside of university is working with some of the largest oil and gas, companies in the world.
Yeah.
And having right off, like I started in May, and in July I was flying to Houston to be presenting to, people who are like 50 years old. And here I am.
Who was it? Chevron UCRM? Wasn't it something
Chevron
like that?
UCRM, upstream capabilities.
Something or the other.
Reservoir management,
Something,
resource management.
whatever.
I think it might have been resource, something like that. But yeah, going to work for Chevron and getting thrown into the fire, trial by fire, kind of first real job, first real client interactions, and you're dealing with big heavy hitters and people who are spending millions and millions of dollars and spending some on us as well to fly up these kids to come and tell you how to use software, and just feeling like an absolute rook. But so my first role was dealing with clients. So I was in the services department, where I was servicing the needs of them big oil and gas companies.
Right.
And so that had, was everything from doing support, answering questions, from implementing software, and starting to move into the technical space of working with databases, writing scripts, working with SQL, and doing some tech stuff. And that was kind of my intro into the tech world, which was cool.
Right. And so you did that you did the services side of that company for what, 4-5 years-ish?
Yeah, services probably about 4.5.
Yeah.
4.5 years of dealing predominantly with clients, being client facing, where you have billable targets, you're working towards those. You kind of got to be on site. Project work. You're on site. You're dressing up. You're looking spiffy and implementing the software that way. And so, that's where we spend a lot of time. We spend a lot of time.
Just generally.
Yeah, generally. But then once you have to travel and work with someone like this guy, then that's when, that's not the reason that we became close by any means, because that's one piece of the puzzle.
That was definitely an outcome. But let's build on that a little bit. So you worked on services for a little bit, and then you switched to software development, right?
Well, because what's, being in Calgary, it's similar to Houston in the States. It's the hub of oil and gas activity. Everyone knows that, if you want to make money in Calgary, you go into oil and gas. You become an engineer. You're doing geology or geophysics, and you make a good career out of it, and you go on your way. But for me, oil and gas is necessary. It's a good resource, and it's a good profession, but it's not the most exciting for me personally.
Right.
I'm not by nature an engineer, and I'm not like aroused by oil production.
Yeah, oil and gas it was, even for me too, right? It was definitely the industry that we served, but I always referenced 3SI Intersight, that eventually is Cerna, as a software company first.
Right.
That just serviced the oil and gas. So we were servicing those companies, but we weren't necessarily an oil and gas company, which is, I think, part of the reason why I was able to last as long as I was there. But
right.
We'll talk about my work history after, but let's just keep digging into this. So you switched to software development. Why did you have you always had a passion for software?
Well, so that's where that kind of bleeding into that oil and gas, was it my passion? even when I was doing geophysics, I was kind of a completist. I'd got into it not knowing what it was in university and finished it thinking I'd just get into that profession. But then once I started working in that space, I think it would have been fine if I was only working with oil and gas, but the issue is I was working with oil and gas in contrast to technology. At 3SI. Right. We're working with a software company, and you get to see both sides of it, and that's where I started to see and click, kind of thinking back in hindsight, what was I good at in school? Was it the theoretical pieces of geology or was it more so the math and the programming kind of stuff? Because I did do some programming in university, mainly in Python, but playing with MATLAB and having to do some courses in that vein. But I really liked it in university, but brushed it off because I was doing geophysics. Got to get done. Got to get a job. Carry on. So then, when you're working in a software company where you get to see oil and gas, and it's kind of crazy to see all these people making crazy amounts of money and also pulling their hair out because they're working long hours, late nights. Yeah. But then you also get the technology standpoint where you see people being creative. You're creating something from nothing, and you're answering you're answering a need of a customer, and you're creating something for them basically out of thin air, right? It's like you don't need a bunch of materials. You need a computer. You need a problem space. Right. And that's when I started thinking, and I was also getting hands-on with some of the technical aspects that were kind of pseudo code pieces that I was like, I like this, and I would like to get more into this. Yeah. And so then that's when I started buffing it up, and I started doing some online courses to buff up some full stack web development capabilities, so that then I could stay with the company and then just transition straight into a full-time tech role to build some tools, build a tool set that I could take with and run with in the future.
Well, so we were at that time, right? We were living together. And I think what's an underrated how do you say it? It's an underrated aspect of your approach to just like your career and just I think generally is that you thought of wanting to switch to software development because I mean we did have there was to give the context of our old company, there was two major streams of the company, right? There was the project services side, which is where Kohl and I both kind of spent majority of our careers with the company with, and then there was the R&D side, right? And I think that an underrated thing that you did was you recognized that even though you were in the project services side, you wanted to switch into the R&D side, and you made it known early and often. It took a few years, right, before it actually went through, but then you didn't let that hold you back. You kind of, and that's how you kind of know that it's a passion is that you continually try to get it, whether it was on I know that you kept saying that you would put it on your annual performance goals and targets. And then eventually we were talking to the higher ups, trying to figure out a way to transition you. And then kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back in regards to you making the switch was even though we were flying to Houston for like almost every other week for almost a year working that Apache project, you were also doing your online courses there. So it's like people see that you switched from say services to dev, but they don't necessarily see the work that was put in, like late nights, whether it was after work and you would be like in your room just doing some courses, or you would tell Brian and I that you couldn't go for dinner because you had an assignment that you had to work on, right? So it's like that level of dedication is super interesting because I think a lot of people that want to switch careers or switch paths in just their lives, they see other people doing it and they think it's just I just have to ask and then eventually it'll happen, but they don't see like the work behind the scenes for making it work. So like that I think is super impressive, and it's something that other people can definitely learn from if basically if you just wanted to make the switch. You gotta grind.
It kind of comes back to what we were saying a couple minutes ago about trying, right? And you need to try, and then you need to try to do. You need to be a doer, because it's one thing to have dreams. It's a great thing to have dreams, and a great thing to be able to recognize your situation and recognize that you may or may not want to change. Right. So, make a change.
Yeah, just do it.
Make make a
Nike.
change. Yeah, it's just do it.
Just do it.
Take a step.
Yeah.
It usually just takes one step. You know, Tony Horton.
Yeah.
Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
Neither was your body.
Yeah.
But neither
P90X.
but neither was your career, right?
Yeah.
You either had to do schooling, jump into a career,
Yeah.
identify what you want to do, start dealing with mentors, communicating to managers, additional, continued education, and then, put a plan in place and start executing on it.
Yeah.
You can't be complacent. You can't, just watch the days fly by, watch your life fly by, or else you'll look back and think, what if?
Yeah, and that reminds me of, and I tell this story pretty often, but our old CEO, he would always say this one thing to me that, for whatever reason, if none of the other, thousands and thousands of pieces of advice that he gave both you and I, right, throughout our time there. But one of the things this is the one thing that always resonated with me, was that he said that you just need to know where you are today, and need to know where you want to go at some point, right? And you don't know the decisions that will work out, and some of the decisions you make won't, right? But as long as you know where you are and you know where you're trying to get to, as long as every decision that you make from here on out gets you closer to that, eventually you'll hit that target, right? And I think that is true about you and yours, is that you knew where you were, which was at the time services. You wanted to move into dev, right? So you set that goalpost, and then the decisions you made in between there got you there.
Yeah, and to even wrap that back a little bit more and to look a little bit further, is I started looking at, what do I want to do with a career?
Right.
And, which avenue do I want to take? Where I am right now, what is the path that is just generally aligned with a services role and where you're going to climb?
Right.
You become a senior in that position, or you become a manager, and then, it's kind of unclear. You got to either hit a different decision point, or you kind of stick around in one of those spots and hit a ceiling.
Right.
And so when I thought about, well, if I wanted to climb the corporate ladder, would I want to do it here? Do I like the job that I'm even doing to begin with? And when I thought about my experiences and what I liked about it, was the tech side, and I knew I want to get into the tech space.
Right.
Join development, but it wasn't just to join development, because I was thinking, if I was to stay at a company and climb the corporate ladder, I want to be on the development side, so I could start climbing and managing people there, move into more of a higher product management role, or eventually take over like a CTO kind of role. And I knew that if I wanted to do that with my personality, I need to know something from the ground up. So start at the bottom, move into development before climbing any higher in my role, and then trying to hop laterally. It's kind of hop in early and get those pieces. But that was also, if I was staying at a corporate company where I was going to climb the corporate ladder, I also knew that doing development was a door opener for being able to write mobile apps, write games, get involved with different stuff in the tech space, so that I could step out. And it was kind of always going to be a stepping stone. Hopefully continue to get to write lots of code, because that's fun. But it was always going to be a stepping stone for building on my career further.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting, because, to spoil the ending, or to spoil where we're at now, that's exactly what happened, right? Is that you took those skills, you spent a few years doing dev for that old company, and then now here we are. And we'll talk a little bit about some of our ideas and how we're working, or what we're working towards in a bit here. So just to give my view of my personal career, we both kind of had I'd say we had a bit of a different trajectory, at least when we were younger, in the sense of, I've always known that I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
It's always been, and I don't think that a lot of people.
Yeah, that was not on my mind until I met you, and now you've ruined everything.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that a lot of people, when they're younger, know exactly what they want to do, but for whatever reason, I've always resonated with the idea of an entrepreneur. I didn't even know if I knew what the word was when I was a kid, but it was more of just doing things for yourself and just making things, not necessarily, I'm not a creative, but just being able to like, start something and do something for yourself was always what resonated with me.
What do you think was that initiator? Like, what did you see when you were young? Like,
it's weird because in hindsight, I honestly, I don't know. It was so like there's the classic, like, your garage sailing or your lemonade stands and whatever. But for me, sure, I did those things, but it was more of, I didn't want to wait for other people to tell me that I could do something. And so at the youngest story, the story I can remember the most about that in particular is my parents, I wanted a dog when I was growing up. I wanted a husky. And my parents were just like, no, it's too expensive. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, why do they have to determine if like we have, like, it's not like we're not an affluent company or family. And I knew that it's not like we just have money to just throw around. So, but I was like, why do they determine that specific scenario? Right. So I would go kind of door to door and just get bottles from people, and just did that for a few months. And then I would every day in the newspaper at the back of the classified section, that's where you used to be able to find how to buy dogs. And there's always like husky pictures and stuff like that. And I'd circle it and it would say like $1,000 to buy this husky.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I just need to raise $1,000. And then I was like, well, that's not true because I need dog food. I need a kennel. I need toys and all these things. So I just set the number at, $1,500, $2,000.
Right.
And then I just kept getting bottles and bottles and bottles.
How old do you think you are at this time?
I'm 7, 8,
and so you're 19, 20.
So I'm just grabbing bottles, and then I eventually get enough money that I'm like, I go to my parents and I'm like, hey, money isn't the issue anymore. Let's go get this husky. And then my mom's just like, nah, I'm allergic. And I was like, that seems like a
classic
scam.
mom move. Who doesn't
exactly.
want no puppies.
Exactly. To this day, she always, it's like her biggest regret. She's always like, I can't believe I didn't get you a dog. Like, it's my one thing that I wish I did. Like, I ruined you, but now I'm allergic to dogs. So it's like.
You're allergic to dogs?
I don't know. I think I might be.
Yeah, you just don't like them now. You're jaded.
I know. But yeah, so like that was my first, like, I guess that was just always been my mentality. And then after that, I started getting to, my dad had always had computers when I was growing up. So I was always tech savvy, or more tech savvy than everyone else, just because we had a small little old school Mac 1, I think it was, just sitting at the house, and I learned how to type at a really young age. And then I started to, take computers apart, and then Windows desktops started coming, and lots of people were starting to get home computers. Right. And I was like, well, I know how to build these, so I'll charge people to build them. And I would just like go on Memory Express, choose a bunch of hardware pieces, build them up, and then sell a full rig to somebody. Yeah. And just get them to pay me a little bit of like for labor. Right. So it's always just been my mindset. And then that kind of that same mindset took me to university, where I took business at Mount Royal, which was one of my favorite times on earth. Like, I loved university there. But I got introduced to entrepreneurship formally by a bunch of teachers there, because they were just coming out. When I joined in 2008, it was the start. We were the first class of their entrepreneurship minor. So we were the first ones to go, the first cohort to go through that. So it was a work in progress, and where it is now is insane to where it was, 7 years ago, 8 to almost 10 years ago, over 10 years ago now. But that's just where I got introduced to entrepreneurship. And then it's always been my mindset to start a company and just work for yourself. But I also knew at the time that I didn't know enough to actually start a company, and I didn't really have a good enough idea.
Well, the issue was just you had a head on your shoulders.
Yeah.
Warning you, I shouldn't do this, because it starts something. You need that fearless resolve.
Exactly. Yeah.
You need to be a little bit psycho.
Yeah. You need to have a little bit loose screws in the head. A lot of
those people they don't care about an idea. They don't care about anything.
They just go and do it. And I just wasn't that way. I'm a bit too practical for that. So then I actually fell into software. This is where I think our stories kind of converge, is that I fell into software because my one teacher, who was in entrepreneurship, his name was Evan Hugh. He owned a company called Ideica, and they were a SAP and Microsoft Dynamics consulting firm.
Right.
And I was walking to my last final, haven't applied to any jobs yet, kind of just lost in the world. And I run into him, and he just is like, yo, have you applied anywhere? And I'm like, no, man, like I have no idea what I'm doing after this. And he's just like, come see me after this final. So I write the final, walk to his office. We talk for a couple hours. And he's like, well, why don't you just work for me?
Yeah.
And I had no idea what consulting was. I had no idea. I was more, you know about hardware and software that you play with, but you don't really know about consulting, and you don't know about implementing projects at that age. Like that's not even a thing that you think about. And so I fell into that. And then, fast forward a couple of years and I joined 3SI, and kind of like the rest is history there. 3SI, I spent most of my time working in that services department that we talked about, actually my entire time there. Right. I was a part of that services, and I started off as a project manager and just kind of grew the ranks through that. That's kind of my background. It's pretty, I don't know, mine feels like a little bit more straightforward than yours, because I didn't really switch careers, so to speak. I kind of just stayed along the pathway, and different opportunities came up, I guess, but it for the most part was the same.
I don't know. I'm going to try not to slander my own name here, but there's this concept of being woke.
Yeah, woke. Hip. You're hip right now, man.
Oh, no,
we're almost 30. I don't know if we can say woke.
I know, but people are woke at different points in their life, right? And you could call it, clarity, or knowing your direction, have an idea of what you want to do and what you want to work towards. Some people might be lucky that it just kind of hits them in the face and they know that they got to do something, and then other folks, they got to work for it.
Yeah.
And for me, technology, I was not an early adopter of technology. My family was not early adopters of technology. We were behind the curve. I was not tech savvy.
Yeah.
And it's just because I was nerdy and like that stuff that I picked that up later, and it's kind of always playing catch up. But I think I've always had the capacity to be able to play that and catch up at a good rate. But it was really only in the last couple of years that I've really started to have some real clarity around working towards a goal, a real goal. I've always had goals and things that you're working towards, but to really take a deliberate approach at that was been a later thing in life, and that's where I've started having changes once I've already been in my career, right? I grew up in a very structured, conservative family that you go to school, you go to university, you get a job. And I was under the impression that my dad worked for a company for his entire career, so I figured that's just what you do. Yeah. And so I just was floating, basically.
Right.
And it was in some clarity and through some deliberate thinking and then taking some strides that I was able to identify that I was really floating and that I'm not happy with that. And I want to change that. And that's why there's been so many rapid changes. And saying rapid kind of loosely, it's been over a number of years. Yeah. But having better ideas of what you want to do and then deliberately working towards that. Yeah. So that's a little bit from mine, where you're saying yours a little bit more straightforward. Because I'd almost say you might have been more woke way earlier, right? Right. I didn't know about money. I didn't know I could go and make money, right? I was like, oh, I don't have money, so this sucks. Whereas, you're going and working TT until, or tie until 5 a.m. when you're 14, 15, right? What am I doing? I'm like
playing vids.
Thinking about girls. Yeah. Boobs.
But yeah, it's crazy. And just to touch on that point too, one of the things that you told me as we were over the past year, as we've, or maybe a couple of years, as we've slowly inched our way to, taking the leap and leaving our, security, our financial blanket, our secure job, and trying to do this, is that your perception of even how your dad was as you were growing up versus your perception of him after you've talked to him and kind of understand that yeah, he's worked at the same company and he's grown on that and he's like super successful, but he did take like entrepreneurial risks, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And that's like an interesting thing too, is because when you're a kid, you know, who the fuck knows what your parents are actually doing, and like your perception is nothing, right?
I honestly, so my dad's was a tax accountant, you know, on to bigger and better things now, but when I was a kid, I thought he was a tax collector. I thought he was like, you know, Robin Hood coming around with the bag and like kicking the crap out of people and saying, yo,
that's hilarious.
Give me that. Right. But yeah, he's a you know, tax accountant, and, you know, got in at, you know, Big Four before it was even the Big Four.
Yeah.
And he worked for, you know, one of the Big Four for his whole life.
Yeah.
Doing accounting. It's like, oh yeah, he's a stick to the man kind of guy.
Yeah.
That's what people do, and he was successful, so I can just do the same thing, float by, and I'll be just as successful. But,
right.
You know, and then that's when I was saying that, you know, he started companies while he was in universities. He ran his own construction company while he was growing up in Edmonton, and did a bunch of things. He worked for, and like some of my uncles, they're also entrepreneurs. They, one of them owned a luxury, like formal menswear company. My dad would be working with them and getting lots of responsibility at a young age, working with those guys, you know, and then to go and work at he was at Coopers and Lybrand in Edmonton. You know, he had a very deliberate plan. He had some very intentional mentors,
right,
who were already partners at either Coopers and Lybrand or at PricewaterhouseCoopers once they merged with Price Waterhouse. And he had people that were, you know, chosen in a very calculated manner so that he could model, like build a model of success for him to become partner, basically.
Right.
And he was very deliberate about that. He became partner at age 30 or 31 as the youngest in Canada to become partner of a company. Yeah.
Which is insane.
Yeah. And so then once you're a partner of a company, right, it's not, you're not working for someone, you're part of the partnership. You're working for your team, and you have to drive your own business. You have to, you know, have your own hustle, and you got to be accountable to yourself and to your peers, but not to, I mean, there are a couple of overlooking factors, but he's basically an entrepreneur in a corporate sense.
For sure he is. Yeah, for sure he is.
And then to do that for 30 years before retiring from PwC, it's not, you know, it's 10, 12-hour days of grinding and building something up to be, you know, really successful. And it took me a long time to realize that is the path, and it's not just floating by and, you know, you'll get lucky and, you know, people will acknowledge you because you work hard or you work okay. Like, you got to be deliberate. But
I do think that there's an aspect of that is the case if you want to, you know, like if work is a high priority in your life and you want to grow and expand and like add additional responsibilities as time moves on.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily everybody's mindset, right? And I think that even that knowing like a little bit of like emotional intelligence goes a long way in the sense of knowing what's good enough for you. Like, are you okay working that 9 to 5 because you get paid enough money and you get to maximize your everything else in life, right? Because you have more than enough time, you have the security to do so, you have the family life, etc. And if you're okay with that, like that's a very, very good lifestyle to do, right? Like there's no one saying that like you have to leave your job and you have to be an entrepreneur or pursue entrepreneurship to be happy and to follow your passions. I think it's just knowing what that is and trying to maximize what matters to you. Because I think that there's a lot of people who are going to see what we're doing and be like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. You know, like why are they doing this? And even when you ended up quitting, you had more conversations with other people than I did. But a lot of people were like, you would sometimes, like, as we were going through the weeks leading up to you leaving, there was people that were like positive about it and like super excited. And then there was people that were like so negative and just don't see the vision. And the reality is it's just they're putting their lens of their lives on you. Right. And on me. And that's also an interesting thing. 'Cause I talk about it all the time. Like, my parents are immigrants. They came from nothing in the Philippines, and they came here, and they both ended up working accounting jobs as well. But they both did it for, 30, 35 years, and then they retired. And while maybe not pursuing their passion, I think that their overarching goal wasn't necessarily to do what they loved. It was more to survive. Right. And so,
and to build a life.
And to build a family. And it was, yeah, exactly. It was, and like, I owe them everything. That, like, every opportunity that I have now is because of the risk that they took, in the 80s to come here. And so that's part of my motivation to become to make more and to continually grow, is because my parents couldn't. They didn't have that opportunity to do so.
And you feel responsible to do so?
For sure. I think for me personally, right, I think it's a disservice to everything that my parents sacrificed for me to just coast, like, for me to just to not try. I think, and my parents are okay. Like, I'm okay too if I fail. I'm not okay if I don't try, right? If, like, I wake up, I say this all the time too, if I wake up 20 years from now, because the reality is both you and I could have worked at Acerna for the next 20, 25 years. And we probably would have grown our careers, maybe taken a little bit of responsibility at a bit of a slower pace. And we would have also got paid a lot of money to just, work the regular, like, live that corporate lifestyle. And it's not bad, but it just wouldn't sit well with me if I woke up 20 years from now, have a couple kids, and I just wake up in, like, what's probably a decent sized home, but I'm just miserable, for the mere fact that I didn't take a chance when I was younger or when I could try. Yeah. Right. And that's, to me, the scariest aspect of just life in general, is just not trying or not. And it's almost, we have to stop saying not trying. It's not doing, I feel like the concept that you mentioned earlier about trying versus doing is super interesting. So that was a little bit about our work lives and a little bit of a ramble about who we are, more detail about who we are. Let's talk a little bit about what we're doing now.
What are we doing?
What are we doing? We're doing a podcast right now. Well, we're sitting here in our new office, which is pretty sweet.
It's really sweet.
Yeah.
Who do you got to report to?
At the
end of the week here.
We report to ourselves.
Oh, right.
That's a fantastic feeling.
That's cool.
The flexibility of time is great. But we're here in this office, sitting here, and we're not here just necessarily we don't just have an office just because, right? We're starting a company. Yeah. We're starting a software company that's focused in the personal finance space. Before let's do you remember, let's do this. Do you remember story again? Do you remember when and where we were when we talked about this idea?
When we talked about this idea?
This specific idea at first, yeah. Personal finance software.
So, I'm trying to think here, because I know.
Do you want me to give you my recollection of, like, this specific story? And then you could say if you remember something earlier?
Yeah, sure. Because, in my mind, there were, like, you were kind of alluding to earlier, that we've kind of had an intertwined past in a personal and professional capacity, and I think there's been many moments that have led to this point. For sure. And I feel like you'll touch on a couple, and then I'll fill in the flavor.
So you're right. So I'm not even going to go back that far, because you're right. We did talk. There's a lot of stories about like you and I sitting at, like, it was like 7, 8 o'clock at the office one day, and we're both just creating, like, our financial budgets, and we're like, there's like, that's like way back there. Or there's even, like, sometimes given, like, your dad's skill set, he's embarked a lot of knowledge on you just generally about money management, personal finances, and all of those things. Yeah. And I did not come from that same background. So, like, sometimes you would tell me stories and I'm like, well, shit, that's like genius.
Right.
And it's just like an everyday thing for you, like having multiple accounts and putting savings in for your car here, your house, your future house here, long-term, short-term savings, the whole envelope model.
Yeah.
But specifically for this company that we decided to pursue, and just to be clear to anyone that's listening, if anyone's listening, we're intentionally being a little bit vague about this company that we're working on. And over time, we'll describe a little bit more. But this specific company that we're focusing on right now at a high level is personal finance software.
Yeah.
We can say that. That's pretty pretty easy to say. But this specific idea, my recollection of it is you and I were playing darts at the old office at Acerna. I think it was around Christmas time, because I think it was right before I left. I think it was before Christmas last year. So almost
before you left for the Phils.
Yeah, before I left for the Philippines a year ago.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about how, like I think we were talking about just like how we've had a lot of run-ins in our past about, when it comes to personal finance, and like how you've taught me things, and then it's kind of spiraled into how what we sold at Acerna dealt with finances, not personal finances, but we helped every oil and gas company in the world better manage and just allocate their money.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of learnings from that. And I think those two ideas that made it so we're like, we can leverage the last 6 years of learnings of us helping, the Shells, the Apaches, the ConocoPhillips, the Encanas. So name your company. We've helped them. Yeah. You and I personally have probably touched all of them. Yeah. We can leverage the learnings that we did with the corporate world, and then both of our personal interests in personal finance and money management, and somehow find a way to mesh the two worlds together. Yeah. And that's, to me, my recollection of where and when we came up with this idea.
Yeah. Yeah, because for me, I think that's right. And I think it was kind of a joint effort to think of it, but it was a joint effort in the sense that we were thinking about ideas. We're thinking about what we could land on. Yeah. And I think maybe I inadvertently had planted some seeds because I'd been doing some micro stuff. You're talking about finances of just tools that I'd been given by my dad growing up that I needed to do. If I wanted to eat, I had to, deal with my allowance and split it up into categories and save and tithe and all those good things. But there's a couple pieces of those that I shared, and then there was kind of micro things, and then there was like spreadsheets that were for either budgeting or things that I'd create for my wife. At the time, girlfriend, that were pretty micro, solving a little problem and pass that on. I think those were kind of little seeds that were planted until you kind of took those and kind of went a little bit more macro and said, what if we took a go at a personal finance application,
at solving that problem,
at a problem that way, and that's when things, and it is interesting that. Talking about fate or destiny or, a
little bit about
higher being. It started to make sense of our entire past. That's like all the work that we've been doing in our career and things that we've been working towards that we thought as soon as we leave this company, they're never going to be transferable and we're never going to use these things. We just got to get out and start new and start building. All of a sudden, those were dovetailing into our next idea in a different industry, that things started to click and started to sound really interesting.
Yeah. And I think that we had the benefit of working with a tremendous amount of entrepreneurial minds. Right. Like that company. So again, for context for people, Kohl and I both joined a company called 3ESI in 2014. Yeah. And at the time, 3SI, so I joined the company in, I think it was February, and then Kohl joined the company 2-ish months later in like May-ish. And so at the time of us joining that company, we were maybe the 30th, 40th employees of that company, somewhere in the less than 50 number for sure. I don't know the exact number, but since 2014 and us leaving that company in 2019, it grew to, I think, just over 300 people. So it went from 40 people 6 years ago to 320, 330 people later. And we didn't necessarily grow organically. Almost none of our personal growth was through that company was organic. A lot of it was, I mean, there was definitely organic growth. I don't want to, if Wayne ever hears this, he would get mad at me for saying that, that there wasn't organic growth. But the strategy that we took as that 3SI company was to grow via acquisition. So in that same 6 years, we went through 2 rounds of refinancing, and we went through probably 5 or 6 acquisitions, which grew us exponentially every single time. But what that did, which I think is super interesting, is not only did we have the people that were around us at 3SI, because we joined a small company, it was still in that early startup growth stage. So everyone had kind of that entrepreneurial mindset, wearing multiple hats, doing a lot of things, working for each other. And you had very easy access to the CEO of the company, who's like our friend, right? But then every time we bought another company, their CEO came, their entrepreneurial minds, and they were in the same position as us. So then that grew. And then, so now all of a sudden, fast forward 6 years later to 2019, you have 6-7 companies worth of CEOs, like who've been running these companies for 20, 30 years, right? Who have that, who were having that grind, right? And their mentality was there. And so I think it's
a little bit infectious.
For sure.
Right?
For sure it is. And I think that that's part of why you were saying that, like, you and I we've been ideating for the past, since as long as we've known each other.
Right.
We've just like KAJ apparel. You know, like we've thrown around a couple ideas here and there, and we've dabbled in a little bit as the time progressed. But I think that us being surrounded by a lot of people, and then to be quite frank, that company went through, we saw a lot of people go through a huge exit, and, you know, a little bit of jealousy where it's like, man, why not us?
Yeah. How do you get on that side of the fence?
How do we get on the other side of the fence? And like, I strongly felt that I've helped that company grow, and I've done a lot for that company, and I put in a lot of time. But it would be nice to be on the other side of the fence, you know, when these deals happen. And who knows if that's ever even a scenario where we get to, but it's just putting yourself in that position. Yeah. Right. And I think that's why, after all these years, and we come up with this personal finance idea, all of a sudden we're like, well, shit, like, let's actually explore this a little bit more than just coming up with an idea and then dropping it by the wayside. It not only was a good idea that fits both of our personalities, but I think we both saw the opportunity in it that was bigger. It was bigger than just, you know, a random side company that we would just do on, like, as a side hustle. Right. It had enough legs in it as the time progressed that felt like we could turn this into an actual business. Yeah. Otherwise, why are we both here? You know? Yeah. So that's kind of like the story of where we came up with everything. So over the past, 6 months, it's December right now. December, what day is it today?
2019.
December 20th, 2019. Yeah. We incorporated our company in June of this year. Yeah. And we've had a lot of things happen over that time frame. Both of us were both still working full time, but we've accomplished, I would say, a fair amount of things in the last 6 months doing this kind of part time. And is there anything over the past 6 months regarding our company and like the process that sticks out to you? Like, is there anything that you would say was like the most fun, the best progress we've made to date? What do you think?
Well, in terms of, even to back it up, it's been, so in the past 6 months, what's really happened is, we've quit our jobs, and that event in of itself is pretty aggressive.
Ridiculously aggressive.
Especially because we are still in the idea creation of our product. We don't have anything released yet. We're not making money yet. So to leave a job where you're making a decent salary working downtown, I mean, it's a bit of a jump. It's a bit of an adjustment.
Yeah.
And so that's been one thing that's been fun, but also really scary.
Right.
And is really interesting. It's one thing that, as like two guys, we don't really talk about, some stuff that just can go unspoken.
Right.
But, I think it speaks to kind of the trust and the confidence that we have with each other to be able to take a problem and solve it, or just to be in it together and go on a journey, I think speaks really loudly. And that's been a really interesting piece of the journey, I guess, is you have to be fully confident in yourself. You got to be fully confident in whoever you're doing an endeavor with. Yeah. And so for each of us to have committed to making the leap, we've already had strong bonds, a strong trust, and strong commitment, and all that stuff. But that kind of solidifies in a way that's, bigger than anything ever before. Right. And that's been really interesting. Because that's kind of, it's not something that we talk about. It's not something that we think about, often. But it resonates with me that it's kind of crazy. It's like we're in now, right. And it's kind of dope to have that level of
just trust.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right. Like the idea that we don't necessarily know everything yet. We're not revenue generating, but we have that trust in each other that we think that we'll get to a point where things will work itself out and, we'll be successful in what we do, I think is a testament to the past 6 years of just like shit that we've gone through together, right? Everything from, deciding to just randomly live with each other to everything else in between that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, let's dig into that a little bit more. If the whole
I guess to answer like one of your questions, like what's been fun, like progress to date. I mean, from a fun standpoint, getting a place, right? Getting an office space where we can work and collaborate. Yeah. Already, we've only been working in this space for a week or so, kind of with us both in office. Yeah. And the amount of collaborative sessions we've had that have been really productive has been pretty high, despite us only being here for a week, right? And so that's felt like good progress, and that's created new ideas, new action items for us to carry into the new year. So that's really important. That's been fun. Yeah. Progress to date, I mean, we kind of got these two companies going parallel. One, our fun umbrella, our KAJ company, and then one, our financial company. So I think definitely progress being made in both. And it's kind of fun to see what KAJ can be as we spin up new endeavors or look for kind of side problems that need to be solved. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think for me personally, I had a bit more involvement in the whole incorporation process and the lawyers and whatnot. And I always find that interesting just because it's new and kind of exciting. Yeah. But sure. I think that moving here has already paid enough dividends in the sense of how much we're able to collaborate together. And I think we're able to focus and grow exponentially when we're working side by side. I think that there's definitely people who could be successful, working miles and miles apart. Yeah. But just given, our history too, I think it made a whole lot of sense to get a space like this, and it's been great so far.
You can just, we lived together for 3 years, and then, I only escaped for like a year and a half, and now you're just, hey, move back in. We need you in the office. Please.
I couldn't live without you. But the other thing too that's been super fun for me has been slowly building up this idea and talking to people about it. Like we talked to a couple local, entrepreneurial companies here, Startup Calgary, Platform Calgary, these types of entities who have experts when it comes to starting companies.
Yeah.
And even just going in and honing our craft of explaining what it is that we're doing, but then, you know, kind of getting the cold shoulder sometimes, kind of getting shut down here and there. It's oddly fun for me when people say we can't do something, or it's like a bad idea, or it's that like it's been done before.
Yeah.
I kind of like love that because it's like a sickness, but I just want to just make it work now, you know,
Right.
when people doubt. And although that's happened, I would say the opposite is kind of more true for me, in the sense of everyone that I feel that we've talked to definitely sees potential in the stuff that we're pitching them. Maybe we could be a little bit better in the way that we deliver the message, but I think overall the response has been fairly positive.
Right.
And the only hiccup or the only sticking point to us explaining what it is that we're trying to do is people saying, how are you going to get people's buy-in? That's the only thing that like anyone can, it's really just our ability to deliver. Right. It's and then everyone has, most of the people that we talk to, whether it's, you know, our old CEO, we've pitched this to your dad, or when we've talked to a couple trusted advisors, you know, about our idea, and everyone says there's so much potential in what you can do. It's really just up to you guys, both from a technical and from a, you know, from a execution perspective.
Yeah.
Can you guys deliver?
Yeah.
And that's what's super exciting to me, because it's on us. Like, it's everything that I think I've personally ever wanted, is like, I want the pressure to be on me. I don't want to be reliant on, you know, my boss thinking that I did good enough for them to warrant me getting a promotion. Like, none of it is on other people's plates anymore. It's just up to us. And that to me is super exciting.
And what's exciting as well is being in this technological space is we don't need $1 million, right? It's not that resources aren't accessible to us, because money will be a resource that we need eventually when it's time to grow, but to start proving value and start delivering some solution. Yeah. We don't need money on money, right? It is more raw resources that we need to do. It's more sweat equity and more, you know, going through the trials and tribulations of working with customers and actually solving a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's too, there's an aspect of, I think the only limiting thing for us to being successful is time, right? And we've talked about this before, in the sense of, you know, both of us were making a good amount of money salary wise, right? We were both comfortable.
For sure.
And we were young, and and we are young. And for as young as we are, I would say that we were making in the top percentile of people in our age range. And with that, that makes kind of the risk a little bit more, in a sense of like, once you get comfortable making a certain amount of money, you don't want to lose that lifestyle.
Yeah. Makes it feel like the risk is more.
And it's like, exactly. Perception of it. But it's the little shit, right? It's like you and I would go for sushi twice a week for the last 6 years.
$40-$50 a head.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just not feasible in this time frame right now.
No.
But that's also a luxury. That was never something that we necessarily needed. But I think that taking that leap of us quitting and leaving that financial blanket is just an insane thing to think about, because not a lot of people would do that, you know?
Yeah, and people say that all the time. If it were easy, then everyone would do it.
Right.
You know, starting a company or starting, you know, your own business, or just taking a risk is, you know, there is a risk, and it's easy to look at the risk and say, I'm okay. I'm doing just fine. I'm going to carry on. But on the other hand, you can't just take risks willy-nilly.
Yeah.
I think we've both been pretty calculated. And also, the upside is huge, and the downside is
we find a job.
Yeah, you go get a job, and we carry on with our lives.
Exactly. So you want to hear something crazy?
Yeah.
We've been talking for an hour and 10 minutes now.
Right.
Kind of flew by.
Talking to you felt like 4 hours.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, I think from a pilot podcast perspective, we could probably wrap up around here. We've talked a little bit more about ourselves, but we're definitely going to do more and more of these and talk about, get a bit more into detail about like the company itself that we're working on, the companies that we're working on, as well as talk about the more tactical approach that we're taking. We've fully, I would say, adopted the lean startup methodology, and we're learning. We're learning as we go. We're making a bunch of mistakes, and I think that's a good thing. And we want to bring all of the listeners, all of the viewers, everyone who just takes the time to listen to this on that journey.
Right.
I think that there's opportunity for people for us, even just for us, this is almost like a therapeutic situation where it's like we can reminisce and we can talk back and think about the things that we've accomplished. But also I think that people would get some pretty cool insight into some of the things of what it's like to be an entrepreneur and not have everything set up for us.
So I mean, for us right now, it is very much a day zero or a ground zero kind of perspective right now.
Yep.
And as this grows and as we tackle different challenges and bring those to light and help share that, because we're going to be talking with other entrepreneurs as well and the challenges that they go through and the way about they've gone about their business, and they're going to be from all kinds of different industries.
Yeah.
But to see how those mindsets work, I think will be really interesting to dive into, and then also taking the key pieces of those businesses and those challenges and breaking those down.
Definitely.
Because those will be learnings for us and things that we can potentially apply, or it's things that we've already gone through.
Yeah.
Or things that just may be interesting that we can talk and banter about. For
sure. So to close this podcast out, just want to give a shout out. If there's anyone that's still listening to this specific section
4 hours in
of the podcast, that's insane.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. We love you.
So much.
Shouts out to you for putting up for
you're wonderful. Smile. Don't forget to smile.
Stories.
You're wonderful.
The plan right now is for Kohl and I to record a podcast once a month and we're going to call this the Founders Series. So the two of us will kind of highlight the things that we've accomplished. And like I said earlier, the tactical things that we're doing on a month-by-month basis.
Right.
But then in between those sessions, we'll try to find other local entrepreneurs, and not even just entrepreneurs, but people who we perceive are doing things that they're passionate about.
Yeah.
And just try to get into their headspace, try to figure out why they do what they do, and try to just learn from them. So we'll try to, the plan right now, the go forward plan right now is to release 2 podcasts a month. And that will be our 2020 resolution.
Yeah.
Make sure you join or you follow us on our socials. If you go to @KAJ Convos, we'll be on every platform, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, even TikTok, you name it, we'll be there. Like I said, we'll be posting a podcast twice a month, but this podcast is also filmed and recorded and will be posted on YouTube. Everything at KAJ Convos. Make sure you follow Kohl on his socials. It's @_Kohl, KOHL Meister.
Kohl Meister. Yeah.
KOHLMEISTER.
You're Adrian Bautista _
@Adrian Bautista _ So
yeah.
Kohl's again is @_Kohl Meister _KOHLMEISTER. And mine is @Adrian Bautista _ @ADRIANBAUTISTA_ We have a lot of content planned, not just this podcast, and we can't wait to get it out to everyone. Any last words? signing out.
Again, yeah, just thank you for tuning in for the pilot episode.
I thought it was fun.
And we're just chit-chatting. Is just the intent we want to be able to have a KAJ convo, and I know this one was a little bit heavy into some details of career stuff and some stuff that's kind of personal to us. But as we expand this, I think it's just going to continue to get more and more content, more and more interesting, and we're going to have a lot of fun with it. So, yeah.
Definitely. Cool. Well, thanks everyone. If you're still here, thank you for listening. Remember, keep it KAJ.
Always keep it KAJ.
Sweet. All right. Later.